You once upon a time made a theory that Link is dead in Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
I disagree with your theory.
Ooh. Okay. Bum, bum, bum.
The Link is dead theory. This famous and heavily debated theory is still being widely talked about among Zelda fans, especially since Majora's Mask 3DS was recently released. As you may know, this theory implies that Link's whole adventure in Termina may be his journey through death. But remember, there's at least two sides to a theory. This video will look at the possibility of Link not being dead in the end of Majora's Mask using all available evidence such as in-game text, Hyrule Historia, the official game guide from the original Majora's Mask, interviews with the Zelda producers, a Nintendo Power magazine, and the Prima Collector's Guides of Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess. But before we proceed, I want to point out that this is not a hate video towards game theory, or anything to do with Ben. The purpose of this video is for everyone who is watching to come up with their own conclusion after seeing both sides of this theory. This is currently the most in-depth video that determines whether Link is alive or dead during the events of Majora's Mask.
How the characters handle their personal losses, and the order in which you confront them, perfectly match up with what's known as the Kubler-Ross model of grief, which basically says that when someone is confronted with death, they go through 5 very distinct emotional phases: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Well, there was a recent interview with Zelda producer Eiji Aonuma regarding the 5 stages of grief. He says that it's certainly true that each one of these different areas talked about has a different emotional feel to it. One feels like it's tinged with sadness and the other with anger. That certainly was intentional, but I also want to point out that it's not that each one of these areas only has one emotion that they are conveying. There are certainly other notes that we're trying to hit as well. And the reason we did this is always to allow the player to experience that emotion. What Aonuma means by this is that the feelings of grief are not the only emotions that are in each area in Termina. He wants players to experience these different emotions in their own way. This means the grief theory is neither true nor false, as it's up to us on how we interpret the different areas of Termina.
But in my mind, there's more evidence to suggest something even darker. I propose to you that throughout Majora's Mask, Link is actually in purgatory, the waiting room of the afterlife, and that the game represents his journey to accept his death and move on. First, look at the name of the place, Termina. That's not even subtle, Nintendo. Termina, like terminal, the end? It's a pretty big red flag.
Let's see if it is a red flag by looking at another recent interview with Eiji Aonuma. He is asked about the origin of the name Termina, and says that Termina is a terminal, which means a place where people come and go. This would make sense since Clocktown acts as a central point which connects to other parts of the world. This is even hinted in the official game guide as shown here. Clocktown serves as a hub for the parallel world. So in short, Termina doesn't mean the end, but quite literally a terminal where people come and go.
Then look at how Link finds this place. Isn't it a bit strange that Link is falling down through a tree trunk into what equates to practically a whole new country? Really, I ask the question, where is this place supposed to be located?
Underground?
Then how was there a sky?
To answer why there is a sky, we need to look at how Link actually gets to Termina. Before Link enters the clock tower, he goes through an interesting corridor that twists 90 degrees with the trees merging with the stone and the sound of Link's footsteps changing. If we look at the official game guide from the original Majora's Mask, there's a text that explains what this is. In your new form, you'll be able to use Deku Flowers to launch yourself into the air. Use that power to traverse the chasm in the Mesa-Peppered Cave that serves as a portal connecting the world of Hyrule with the parallel world of Termina. And there's our answer. Link travels through a portal to a parallel world, which explains why there is a sky underground. And this is not just in the official game guide. Some of the other sources mention Termina as a parallel world and is connected by a portal. And just to confirm Link is still in Hyrule before he enters the portal, There's a text in Hyrule Historia which says, Link's transformation into a Deku Scrub is caused by the spirit of a member of the Deku tribe that died in the forest connecting Hyrule and Termina. Now we know for sure that Link travels to a parallel world through a portal. But can a parallel world mean it's purgatory? In the Zelda series, it's actually very common for Link to travel between two different worlds, as he has traveled between worlds of light and dark, light and twilight, past and future, sky and surface, and much more. There are even other parallel worlds in the Zelda universe, such as Hyrule and Lorule, both with very similar looking counterparts, just like in Termina. There is another parallel realm mentioned in Hyrule Historia that is called Subrosia, which is parallel to the land of Holodrum. We know that these parallel realms in other games are not purgatory. If Termina really is Link's purgatory, he wouldn't be able to go back to the Lost Woods if he was dead or trapped in purgatory. Underneath the text about the portal, there's a map of the underground section just before Link enters the clock tower. If we look here, it says, to the Lost Woods. This would imply that it's actually an option for Link to go back to the Lost Woods, which would not be possible if Link was trapped in purgatory. But let's be reasonable here, as some of you might be wondering how Link and Epona managed to get back to the Lost Woods from the bottom of the tree trunk. It has been speculated among Zelda fans that there's an alternate route which could lead back to the top of the tree. One possible alternate route could be a passageway that goes up and around the tree, which the Happy Mask salesman might have used to follow Link. The tree trunk is even referenced as a passageway, which can add to the possibility there is another way back to the top. Link could have been assisted by one of the citizens of Termina in order to find this hidden passageway. One final possibility is that Link could have used another portal to go back to the Lost Woods. This is backed up by how Link traveled in his Ocarina of Time adventure. Link travels within the Lost Woods and goes through portals to different areas of Hyrule. The same can be applied here since Link is still technically within the Lost Woods. But there's one important question we still haven't answered. Did Link die falling down the tree trunk?
And remember, Link supposedly fell a really long way to end up here. If that's the case though, he would have died. Granted, there's a lot of creative license in these games, don't get me wrong, but Nintendo has always taken falling very seriously in 3D Zeldas.
If we go back to Link's Ocarina of Time adventure when he was in the Fire Temple, he's actually supposed to fall a very long distance all the way to the room outside the boss chamber by using the Megaton hammer to smash the pillars as it's required to access the boss chamber. Link lands completely undamaged after falling from this very high height. Also, if we look in the Prima Collector's Guide for Twilight Princess, there's a text that says, "A long drop onto solid ground may sting a bit, but it usually isn't fatal. In fact, Link can plummet quite a surprisingly long distance before the impact starts to inflict damage." This shows that Link, whether it is the hero of time or hero of Twilight, is capable of surviving long falls, meaning it's quite possible he could have survived falling down the tree trunk. But there is something else that could greatly increase the likelihood that Link survived the fall. What does Link land on? A Deku Flower. If Link lands on a Deku Flower from a high height, it prevents any fall damage happening to Link. Some of you might be thinking, oh, that's just simply game mechanics. But if we look in the Prima Collector's Guide of Majora's Mask, it says, the Skull Kid has tricked Link. There's nothing beyond the second hollow tree except a long fall into dark depths. Here's hoping for a soft landing. As luck would have it, Link lands safely on a large flower, none the worse for wear. And there we have confirmation that Link survived the fall by landing safely on a Deku Flower. Now we need to find out what happened to Epona and how she ended up in Termina.
Now that you mention it, where did Epona go? You see them run into this tree and I guess they could just jump from one stump to the next, but does Epona also live through that huge fall? Even if she does, Skull Kid would have to transport her over this water, through this cave door, and over these deadly platforms, all for her to end up at Romani Ranch later in the game. And he'd have to do that all before Link arrives so that he'd be ready to hover there all cool and Magneto-like. It does seem pretty suspicious.
The only possible way that Epona survived the fall and ended up in Romani Ranch is only if the Skull Kid used Majora's Mask to teleport Epona, especially in the short amount of time it takes. Judging by the vast amount of powers and abilities Majora's Mask displays, teleportation would definitely be a likely talent that this mask can perform. This is also backed up by the fact that teleportation is quite common in the Zelda series. We have seen different characters perform teleportation many times. It is even mentioned that we don't know the true extent of power that Majora's Mask has, which strengthens the case that it has the ability of teleportation. Now that we know Majora's Mask has a high chance of having the ability of teleportation, let's go back to discussing Epona. One thing that we can confirm about Epona is that she is not a parallel version in Termina as some people believe, but in fact the exact same Epona from Hyrule. After completing Snowhead Temple, the snow disappears and reveals a gossip stone that gives a small description of what happened to Epona. The gossip stone says, a small lost horse seems to have been taken in by Romani Ranch, south of town, which suggests that she is not a parallel Epona. In the other source it states that Link has a reunion or is reunited with Epona. This wouldn't really be a reunion if it was a parallel Epona. Speaking of parallel versions, let's move on to the parallel characters of Termina.
And that's also why most of the people you see throughout Termina are identical copies of the ones you met during your Ocarina of Time journey. Link's personal purgatory, his journey to accept his death, is populated with people he's encountered before.
Since Termina is a parallel world to Hyrule, the characters from Termina are identical parallel counterparts. In the original game guide, it states that Clock Town is populated by people who are dead ringers for ones in Ocarina of Time, and that they are different people. As previously stated in the video, Lorule is another parallel world to Hyrule in A Link Between Worlds. Zelda's counterpart is Hilda, and Link's counterpart is Ravio. By knowing that there are parallel counterparts in different Zelda games, it makes it less likely for Termina's counterparts to simply be memories of Link if Termina is purgatory. There's also the point that there are characters in Termina that Link has never seen in his Ocarina of Time adventure, meaning those characters couldn't have been part of Link's memories.
And consider the masks. The transformation masks all represent characters who have died. Knowing that these different transformations are Link assuming the forms of deceased characters, turn your attention to this, the Elegy of Emptiness. It's a song you get late in the game that allows you to create statue clones of your current form. In a lot of ways, they're like funeral effigies, standing there as a memorial to the dead. Now, if the only masks that allow you to create a clone using this song are the ones that are related to dead people, and Link is somehow able to create a clone of himself, that would mean
It would mean Link is alive because of one small detail. If we look at each of the 3 transformation statues, we can see that they all have dead eyes, except for one, Link's statue, which shows blue eyes instead of dead eyes. This would seem to indicate that Link is alive, as the Elegy of Emptiness is a melody that creates a shell of a person's current image. Another interesting thing to note is what Pamela's father says about each one. If Link wears any of the 3 transformation masks while talking to Pamela's father, he will mention that his ghost radar is reacting to the current form Link is in. And he will say that Link is both similar to a ghost and different to one at the same time. If Link doesn't wear any of the transformation masks, he will only comment on Link's fairy and doesn't mention his ghost radar is reacting, which suggests Link isn't dead like the other 3. One final thing to note is what the composer brother, Sharp, says to Link when he enters the Springwater Cave. This is no place for one as full of life as you, which suggests further that Link is alive and would make sense for his statue to have blue eyes. And now, we shall determine if the hero shade really is a Stalfos or not.
And in Twilight Princess, there's the hero Shade, a Stalfos-looking creature who has officially been confirmed in Hyrule Historia as the spirit of the hero of time, aka Link in Majora's Mask. Anyway, Zelda lore states that those who become lost in the woods are fated to become a Stalfos.
If Link really did become a Stalfos in the Lost Woods, it would actually go against Link being dead during Majora's Mask. The reason for this is because of a text in Hyrule Historia that states that children who are lost in the Lost Woods become Skull Kids, while adults become Stalfos. Link is a child during the events of Majora's Mask, which means Link would have turned into a Skull Kid if he had died. Now some of you might be wondering, couldn't Link eventually turn into a Stalfos after being a Skull Kid? To answer that, let's find out how old the Skull Kid is. If Link talks to Anju's grandmother and asks her to read the story of the 4 giants, it gives a large clue on how old the Skull Kid is. The imp was a friend of the giants since before they had created the 4 worlds. The 4 worlds being the areas that are outside of Clocktown. This would imply that the Skull Kid is either hundreds or thousands of years old, much older than the ancient kingdom of Ikana. So in conclusion, Skull Kids remain as they are for a very long time, meaning Link couldn't have become a Skull Kid if he appears as the hero Shade in Twilight Princess. But what exactly did Link become? What is the hero Shade? From the appearance of the hero Shade, it shows a mix of ghostly and skeletal textures. The hero Shade doesn't appear to be a Stalfos because Stalfos are shown as completely skeletal. If we look in Hyrule Historia, it refers to the hero Shade as a ghost. This would mean Link did not become a Stalfos, and therefore makes it clear that he did not die within the Lost Woods. It would make sense for Link to have died much after the events of Majora's Mask, because of the fact that the hero Shade is wearing armor and that one of his eyes is missing. But we shall return to the topic of the hero Shade later on, as we now need to move on to what is considered the strongest proof of the Link is dead theory.
And speaking of the Happy Mask Salesman, he provides what I think is the strongest proof of this theory. Do you happen to remember the first line he says to you in the game?
You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?
When he says this to you at the beginning of the game, you assume he means Link being turned into a Deku shrub, right? That's just what happened, but that line actually repeats again later in the game. Every time you let the moon crash towards Earth, the animation shows the moon destroying Clocktown, Link getting consumed by fire, then you hear the Happy Mask Salesman's laugh and see this line. The terrible fate isn't being turned into a scrub, it's Link dying.
Actually, if we look at what happens after the moon crashes in the 3DS version, there is some new text that has been put in. And so the angry moon fell from the sky, annihilating this world and its many inhabitants. This new text seems to imply that the moon crashing is an actual alternate ending, instead of being a part of Link's purgatory. We've seen alternate endings before in the Zelda series, the obvious one being the timeline where Link fails to defeat Ganondorf in the final battle. If Link really was in purgatory, there would be no need to show the text of an alternate ending that explains the destruction of Termina. We finally reached the end of Game Theory's Link is Dead video, but we're not done just yet. There's still more evidence for the other side of this theory. Let's start off by looking at the hero of Twilight. What kind of relation does he have with the hero Shade? If we look in Hyrule Historia, it says that the hero of Twilight is a descendant of the hero of Time. But what kind of descendant would this be? Would this be a reincarnation or an actual blood-related descendant? If we look further into Hyrule Historia, it confirms that the hero of Twilight is in fact a blood descendant. Just then, a human appeared, who had been transformed into a beast by the Twilight. It was none other than Link, a young man from Ordon Village, in whose veins flowed the blood of the hero of Time. There are also quotes from the hero Shade himself, who briefly talks about blood relation. Those are only for ones who carry the blood of the hero. They are forgotten ways that do not leave our bloodline. Although I accepted life as a hero, I could not convey the lessons of that life to those who came after. It's also worth noting that there are 2 other quotes, "Go and do not falter, my child," and "Son." However, these 2 quotes can be meant differently. Surprisingly enough, there may actually be more evidence to support the blood relation standpoint, but it will mean going into another theory. This other theory, which ties into the events of Twilight Princess, is a theory that Milan was the hero of Time's love interest. There are several pieces of evidence that point to this. If we take a look at the hero of Twilight's lifestyle, he is shown to be a rancher, using Epona to herd goats in Ordon Ranch. There is also the fact that Epona's song is in Twilight Princess, the very same melody that is taught from Milan in Ocarina of Time. Milan says that her mother composed the melody and passed the melody on to Milan. It's reasonable to assume that Milan did the same things with her descendants, which resulted in the melody being passed down for generations up to the events of Twilight Princess. Another clue is Talon humorously asking Link if he would like to marry Milan, but says he is too young for that. There's also the point that Link is seen with Epona at the beginning of Majora's Mask, meaning Milan already trusts Link with her horse. And the final clue is that there is a gossip stone that says that Milan wants a knight in shining armor to come sweep her off her feet. If we look in Hyrule Historia, it says that it's possible that Link, the hero of time, was once a Hylian knight himself, strengthening the theory of Milan and Link being love interests. We are now up to the final piece of evidence of the hero of time being alive after the events of Majora's Mask. In Twilight Princess, there are several quotes from characters and other sources about an ancient hero that saved Hyrule long ago. Now, who exactly would this ancient hero be? The main assumption would be the hero shade being the ancient hero since he appears within the game. But is there any evidence that the hero shade is the ancient hero that the characters are talking about? If we look back in Hyrule Historia, next to the picture of the hero shade, it is titled Ancient Hero, which strongly implies that the characters are indeed talking about the hero shade. But let's actually look at some of the quotes about the ancient hero. When the hero of Twilight is in the Goron mines, he finds out that an ancient hero placed the hero's bow in the mines itself. A Goron elder says that the bow has defeated the most powerful evils this world has ever known. At first, some will think it's the fairy bow because the most powerful evil the hero of time defeated was Ganondorf. However, Link didn't use the fairy bow in the child timeline. The only other bow the hero of time used was the bow he collected from Termino, which is also called the hero's bow. But that is a whole other theory that we won't go into detail on. If the hero's bow in Twilight Princess is the same bow from Termina, then it would be evidence that the hero of time had more adventures after the events of Majora's Mask. One final quote about the ancient hero we will look at is a quote from Renato. In Hyrule, countless tales are told of the ancient hero, and your deeds bring them all to mind. This is interesting, considering that the hero of time was not remembered for his adventures when he returns to the child timeline. This must mean the hero of time wasn't remembered for his main quest against Ganondorf, but is remembered for other adventures he had in Hyrule when he returned to the child timeline. We've now reached the end of the evidence that points to Link being alive after Majora's Mask. Even with all of this evidence gathered, it's likely that there's still more evidence yet to be found. There are other possible indications for Link being alive, but these are more on the grounds of speculation rather than evidence. If you want to see more information, you can check the description below, which will also include any new evidence that has been found after this video is uploaded. There will also be page numbers from the different sources used in this video, along with other material. Before we end the video, there's one last thing from game theory we shall look at.
The youngest combatant in our little game also happens to be the most powerful. Go figure. There's also a high probability that he's dead, so I guess there's that.
A high probability? Careful when saying things like that, otherwise it will lead to having this around Majora's Mask videos. Let's have the people who are watching this video decide on the actual probability of this theory. Do you think Link is dead or not dead? You can vote on here by clicking the link below and decide what side of the theory has the highest probability of being true. Other than that, I hope you have enjoyed watching this video. It took a long time to make and wouldn't be possible without the help of these guys who helped create this video. You can also check out some more awesome Zelda content from these guys. A theory on the Zelda Wii U placement in the timeline, an animated series on the Hero of Time by Cuckoo Lover, a theory video on the 5 Stages of Grief by Vortexy Gaming, and finally, Awesome Face Prod's view on the Link is Dead theory. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Let's find out what would happen if Link actually did die.